I don't think Trader Mickey is exactly political correct. I have nothing against the majority of Disney's things that are incorrect politically, because usually they're not that bad. But Trader Mickey may be something that should err on the side of caution. The short itself is interesting enough in premise. Mickey Mouse is on a ship that is carrying some musical instruments. He is with Pluto, and they arrive on the African coast. But then they are taken over by what certain places online refer to as cannibals. It's not the term I would choose to use, but well, I suppose in theory they are cannibals because they are trying to eat another human. Mickey is technically a human in this regard. Um, but a lot of places online, when I did some research about this cartoon, is referring to them as savages. That is certainly the terminology Disney would have used at the time. So certainly these interpretations of these African natives are bad, to put it simply. And that is something that if you watch this, you need to just bear that in mind. I don't take offense by it because it's many, many decades later and it's a product of its time. But I think some people probably will take offense and be like, oh, how could Disney have done this? This is terrible. I'm boycotting Disney. Don't be ridiculous. But at the time, yeah, not exactly the best interpretation. So it's a little bit uncomfortable to watch, and it does feel very awkward. But yeah, Mickey is captured by these so-called savages, and they are trying to eat him. But then he remembers he has these instruments, and he tries to use these to get him out of this situation. I won't say how he does this or what the outcome is because I don't want to spoil the entire narrative. It's well animated with regards to how it flows. It's well synchronized when you have multiple characters doing activity at any one time. It's got some drama to it. You know, there is the conflict there. How is this going to be resolved? The animation of these savages, and I'm putting that in air quotes, is obviously very stereotypical and very caricatured and definitely not comfortable to watch. I don't think anybody could take offense to it today because it is so old and is a product of its time, but that doesn't make it an easy watch. You're thinking, how could anybody ever have thought like this? How could they ever have interpreted African natives like this? Of course, there is an alternative argument that maybe there was a tribe, a particular tribe of cannibals who would have treated Mickey like this. I don't know. But generally speaking, it's not exactly an accurate representation of African natives, is it? So it's awkward to watch, but it's very interesting from an animation history perspective, and certainly how Disney perceived certain individuals, and how Mickey would have approached this situation. So it's enjoyable for some reasons. In other ways, it's uncomfortable, but I don't think it's impossible to watch. You just have to kind of be mindful that that's what you're going to be watching. It's not necessarily an easy watch. Definitely check it out if you're a fan of Disney. I think it's a really interesting example of certain attitudes Disney had at this time. It was released in 1932, directed by Burt Gillett, and we have the usual brilliant voice cast of Walt Disney as Mickey and Pinto Colvig as Pluto. And I do think the narrative structure works really well. You know, how Mickey comes about getting into this situation and then what sparks the idea for him to try and resolve this. That aspect of it is interesting, and the narrative flows relatively well. But there are things in it that are not that comfortable. I'd love to know what you think of it, and whether or not you think it should be banned. I don't think any art should ever be banned because how can you possibly learn from it if it's banned? But it is uncomfortable. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. It's definitely interesting, sometimes for the wrong reasons. But Trader Mickey, if you're a fan of Mickey or a fan of Disney, it's one worth watching. Just be mindful of these things.